arena. So everything having to do with I-9 forms or trying to ensure that your workforce is legally authorized. And I've been doing that for about 5 years now with the agency, out of the 21 that I've been on. But basically, like I said, it was decided back in 2006 by the government that we wanted to try to be more proactive, because most employers do want to do the right thing and want to have to maintain their paperwork correctly. But there was a feeling that just some of the information still wasn't getting out there, even though at that point in time, the I-9 requirement had been out there for 20 years, and there were still employers, especially smaller ones, that we still come across, and we still come across even today, that have never even heard of an I-9 form or weren't, have them, but they're just not, they're just poorly completed or whatever. So it's a way to try to be proactive, like I said, because our goal is not to punish employers. Our goal is actually to educate employers if we can and get them in compliance. But and I'm gonna get into we're gonna get into a little later what a compliance audit is, but to get you in that position before if you're the subject of an audit. Once you're a subject of an audit, then it is what it is. So whatever your paperwork situation is at that point in time you're kind of stuck with. So like I said, this is an attempt, and I appreciate Andy inviting me out here today, because again, this kind of furthers that goal to just make you aware of what you need to know, and then the decision rests with you whether or not you decide to do that. And to that effect, also just at the on one of the forms, the one which says image on top, the blue, the color one. On the second page, is in the upper right corner, is a photocopy of my business card, which has my contact information on there. So if after today you come across something or think of a question that you didn't think of while we're here, and you want to have somebody to talk to, okay, you have my contact info. Shoot me an email. I'll get back to you in a pretty quick amount of time. If it's something I know off the top of my head, I'll be quicker. If it's a little further where I have to do a little further research, I will do that and get back to you. But again, our goal is to try to help employers. So like I said, it's been going on now for, again, this particular program about 12 years. But again, I'm assuming at this point in time, most of you should probably already know what an I-9 form is. The one I handed out today, just so you have it in front of you, is the latest version of that. And I'll just give you a little background about our agency. Again, we work for Homeland Security Investigations, which is a subcomponent of ICE, but we generally are the ones that in charge of both doing criminal investigations and also anything having to do with worksite investigations, including compliance audits, falls under our jurisdiction. Prior to 9/11, that function rested with what was then INS, and then after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security was created, and they merged what was Customs investigations, U.S. Customs, with what was U.S. INS's investigations, and made ICE. And then within ICE, there's my part, and then there's ERO, which are the ones that are charged with looking for people that have final orders of removal or things like that. So they're under ICE, but that's not what my component does. Okay, we're essentially charged with enforcing one of the broadest amount of federal laws that are out there. Besides worksite, we do financial crimes, we do narcotics investigations, we do gang investigations, crimes against children. There's a broad range of jurisdictions that we have. Basically, anything coming in or out of the country falls within our jurisdiction because of having taken the customs, which basically dealt with things, and immigration, which dealt with people. So basically, anything that crosses the international border coming into the U.S. falls under our jurisdiction. Another thing's strategic technology. So, like again, things that aren't supposed to be exported to certain countries, we're charged with that. So we have a broad array of what we do. Worksite is one component of that. And then within Worksite, there's essentially three parts. There's most of the agents in my group are assigned to do criminal investigations. We have auditors who do just the compliance audits, and that's all they do for us. So they're very knowledgeable about compliance audits because they spend all their time doing them. And then there's myself, who does this outreach to try to, like I said, try to get to the point where we're helping people before they are employers, so that they don't basically have issues. So under that, like I said, I don't know if anybody has any specific questions about the I-9 form, because if not, I don't want to, so I know we have a limited amount of time. I'd kind of rather get more into what a compliance audit is, because that a lot of times is when we show up and say, hey, we're going to, sure.
So the acceptable documents. So on list B, the first one is driver's license or ID card issued by the state,
right?
A state or outlying possession. So is the New York State Gaming Commission license a legitimate form of ID here if they also have a social security card?
As long as it has this other information on there, again, I'm not as familiar, if it has the date of birth, the gender, the height,
Yeah,
like all that
yeah.
stuff, if that's all on there, then yeah, as long as it's a state issued ID, because what B is, yeah, B is just trying to prove that we know who that person is when they come in there,
Right.
you know, as an applicant, or now as a newly hired employee.
Right.
And C is to show that they're established. So yeah, so if they have that and social security card, as long as the social security
Right.
card has no restrictions on it,
Right,
yeah, they're good to go.
okay. So what else, what if they do have a social security card with restrictions? What do you?
Those,
know?
you cannot accept that card then,
No,
because
that's not-
yeah, but it's
So
like,
then you have to have something else, like A,
Ex-
or an A list.
you need an A or a different, something else under C, yeah.
Right, okay.
And essentially too, when you ask them for documentation, the documentation is solely up to them what they want to provide to you.
Right.
So even if you need other documentation for other things, like such payroll or
Right, yeah.
other things, again, you cannot specify like, so, yeah. But you just basically give them the list and say, I need either one A
Something,
or one B
yeah.
and one C.
Okay.
And then your job is, as the employer, is to look at those documents, make sure that they reasonably look to be legitimate,
Right.
and then also, and then to just
Right.
correctly list that information under section 2.
Okay.
So that if we ever do an audit, the auditor can see
Yeah.
that what you saw.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Just the logistics of asking for the documentation, I've gotten different views on that.
Okay.
Do you not ask for something specific, or
That's correct.
how exactly do you want us to
Right.
approach?
You just present this, you know, and you can have it laminated however you want to do it. You don't have to have one attached to each one, but basically say, yeah, you must either give me a list A or a list B and C. But again, you cannot specify, for payroll purposes, if they need social security, well then you can say, I need social security card. If they're gonna be driving a vehicle and they need a New York driver's license, you know, you can say, I need, but not for I-9 purposes, because, and that's not even necessarily, that's not us doing that, that's the Department of Justice, but that runs afoul of what they consider to be anti-discrimination laws. So you're not allowed to specify. So like I said, even if for other parts of the hiring process, they need the other documentation, it's up to them. If they choose to just give you a copy of their green card, or give you a copy of employment authorization card, which are both list A documents, then that's what they have to give you for that. And they said for the other purposes, you may need those other documents, but not for I-9. So just don't, because you don't want to run afoul. And it's usually what happens is, it's not us again. It would be more like a disgruntled employee or whatever down the road saying, hey, when I went in there, and they're going to talk to DOJ, they're not going to talk to us, the Department of Justice, say, they're discriminating, they're asking for certain documentation, they're not allowed to ask me. And then DOJ is going to investigate. So you don't want to create a problem where DOJ, Department of Justice is going to like start looking at, you want to have, so that, and basically just give them the list. And if they ask you questions, tell them it's their choice. So they can, for their own ease, if they choose to just give you the license, social security card, because they need that anyway for other purposes, that's up to them. But yeah, you can't require it. Yes.
Now, how long do these I-9s last for? Because we have a high turnover of employees. They might work for me 1 year, work for somebody else the next year, and then the third year they come back to me. Now, do I have to fill out a whole new sheet?
It depends, again, and there's a lot, and I'm gonna give you a couple of resources, but essentially, it's gonna depend on how long they work for. If they only work for you for a year, under the rule, if the first I-9, if from the first 3 years of hire, is valid. So in the sense, so the fact pattern you gave me actually, if they work for you a year, leave a year, and come back a year, it's still within, so that's only 2 years from the original date of hire, it's still good. But if they left for 3 years and come back, then you have to do a new I-9. Now, there's no penalty for doing a new I-9. You can always do a new I-9, but you have to know, but
So after 3 years, they're expired.
if they've left you, yes. Now, like I said, 3 years from date of hire, then you would have to technically do a new I-9. But like I said, if they stay with you for 5 years, like that I-9 while they're still your employee, it never expires.
Right.
So that's, but yeah, if, like I said, and sometimes some people just for their own whatever might want to, you can do a new I-9, but like I said, if not, there's a resource which if you go on to, and I give you a list of useful websites, it's called I-9 Central. It's a great resource. It's put out by USCIS, who's the agency that actually issues the I-9 form, and it's a handbook. It's pretty lengthy, but it's pretty thorough. So there's a main the front, which will walk you through step by step, like section 1 question, like whatever. It'll walk you through there. But there's also in the back, there's a frequently asked questions section, which also is really good. So if you find something that's not addressed in the front, you can look through, and usually they're pretty good about that. But again, if you get to the point where you still don't know, you're still not sure, you can either, you can contact me, or otherwise you can contact USCIS, and you can ask them that question. They actually have a customer service center for the I-9 form. They will answer your questions for you, like I said, because the goal, again, is not to, I know government paperwork is tricky, okay, we understand that, and there's different reasons why certain things are on there, but the goal, again, is not to try to make it so, gotcha, we were trying to trick you on the form so we can go after you. It's actually, they actually want you to be able to do it correctly. There's also webinars, even online webinars on the I-9 Central you can go onto. You can take it, on your, wherever you are, on your laptop or your desk computer or whatever, just sit there and go through it. There's a lot of information that's available, and USCIS, they update that pretty regularly, and so if they do come out with a new I-9 form, they change both the I-9 form, they also change the handbook that goes with it. They amend it so that everything matches. So again, they're pretty thorough about that, and which is why sometimes they don't get it out there as quickly as they say they're going to get it out there, just because they have to have the handbook ready. Because again, the purpose is they want it to be understood. Yes.
Being that that's so thick and
Right.
going to go on the webinar and you're here, I'm
Right.
gonna ask you.
Sure.
The section 3 for the re-verification
Mhm.
and rehire. Is there a time limit on that? You discussed like 3 years there, or back in a year.
Yeah.
Or should you, any rehire after 3 weeks, should you just go ahead and do it? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
pretty simple part of the form, it's just a signature and a date.
Yeah, I mean, you can just so that, again, so the auditor, because the purpose of, again, too, is just so that if you ever are audited, which is just so that the auditor can see what happened. So yeah, it's also like the same thing, like if somebody gets married, changes their name, you use section 3 as well to update that, or in the case of somebody that has an employment authorization card, which are only usually good for a year at a time, you have to make sure you have to see a new one, because if somebody's a U.S. citizen or they're a permanent resident, okay, and that's what they present to you, is you don't ever have to re-verify that, because we assume that they maintain that status forever. But with employment authorization, again, most cases it's only going to be issued for a year at a time, and the way most people get that is because they've applied to get a benefit. Usually they're trying to get a green card, okay, and what the government will do is they'll say, okay, you can work while this application is pending, because most of the time, it's not always based on marriage to a U.S. citizen, but a lot of times it is. So while we're deciding whether or not to grant you the green card, you can work. Now, sometimes they decide that within a year. Sometimes, for different reasons, it goes on longer than that. So every year, they have to then go down, if that's what they have, and apply to get a new employment authorization card. So that's what you're going to re-verify. And if it goes on for another year, well, then you can attach another back page, basically, so you have another section 3, just so that we can see that you re-verified that, because there's no assumption they're ever going to be granted, and if they ever are denied, the only way you're going to know about that is, let's say, again, the card, let's say, is good to December 31st, okay, but in May, the government says, hey, for whatever reason, we're denying your application. So you're not going to, as the employer, you're not going to know about that, but December 31st rolls by and you say, hey, by the way, you didn't get me a new employment authorization card, they're not going to have one because they're not going to be able to get one because they've been denied now. So that's why that exists, and that's why that burden is on you as the employer, is because, again, we don't know if they're going to be approved or not. So you can't, and even if they give you a receipt says I applied for a new one, you need the actual card, because again, you don't know if they've been denied. Even if they go down and they apply for it, they'll get a receipt because they paid money to apply for a new employment authorization card, but they're not going to get one issued because they've been denied, and they might appeal that, and eventually maybe it'll go somewhere. But that's, if they fail to do so at that point in time, you have to tell them, hey, you can't work again until you get me a valid employment authorization card, or if you've gotten by then a green card or whatever, but something that shows me that you currently have authorization, to work here in the United States.
Understood.
Okay.
Another question, and we've been told not to make copies of their documentation, and what's your take on that?
Okay. I don't know who's telling you. If it's your choice whether or not you're not required to, unless, and I'll get into a little later what e-verify is. But if all you're doing is the I-9 form, yes, it's your choice as the employer whether to do so or not. But if you do so, you have to do it for all your employees too. That's the other thing with that. Right, because again, that's somebody will file a thing, and the Department of Justice will come looking, and that's another thing that they'll go get you on, and next thing you know, you're looking at potentially fines. So you just have to be uniform.
You ran out of ink on your thing, you forgot to get back on it.
Well, I mean, if it's just one, I mean, no,
I
I mean,
understand.
yeah. But I'm saying, because you don't want to fall like they're like, oh, well, if I have an Hispanic last name, you required me, you took my documents and photocopied it. But if I didn't, you don't do that. So you're discriminating against me. So you don't want to create any kind of opportunity, even if it's not legitimate. You don't want to create that perception that then somebody else from the outside coming in is going to look and go, well, now we have to figure out, are you discriminating or not? So, and you can even do it by let's say you haven't done it until now. Let's say starting today, you say, hey, I should start doing this, because it does actually help you a little bit as the employer, just because if we can't make something out on the I-9 form, or if somebody accidentally transposed a couple numbers or something, we can still, if we have the photocopy, we can realize, hey, you know, that the date of birth, it's not, you know, it's not May 23rd, it's June 23rd, you know, it's a 5 and a 6, you know, something, or whatever. The auditors can look at that and they can see what you saw, and so like we're not, you know, so it kind of helps them, but it's not required. But let's say you said, okay, I'm gonna start doing that, and then you do that for a year, let's say, and then you say, hey, you know what, it's too much a hassle, I don't feel like doing it, or whatever. Just do a memo, like we say a memo file, it's basically like a couple cents, not, you know, it's not a formal menu, but it just says, hey, on this date, we just, you know, we started doing photocopies, on this date we decided, you know, we're not doing them anymore. So then we can see, you only did it for during these 12 months, and then we'll know that every I-9 then that was filled out during those 12 months had everything attached, but then anything after that doesn't again. And again, it's just so the auditors can see what you're doing, so we can just understand, so we're not trying to be tricky either, but, you know, yes.
Okay, so it would still be discriminatory even if they're marking that they're not U.S. citizens and that's why you're taking their information?
Yeah, I'm saying, yeah, it's potentially, like I said, and we're not the ones that look at discrimination, but it's just, you don't want to create that, so yeah, you have to either, like I said, if you hire, you know, 10 people this year, and you know, you either have to, and you photocopy, you should have photocopies of the documentation for all 10. You know, if you don't want to have a situation, yeah, even if it's U.S. citizen, because U.S. citizens are the same as every, you know, for I-9 purposes, everybody has to have an I-9, whether they're U.S. citizen or not. So that's the thing too. You have to say, that's what you don't want. You don't want to say, well, okay, U.S. citizens, they don't do this, but for everybody else, they make us do this. You don't want a situation like that. You don't want to create two classes, because you have to treat everybody the same. So I'm saying, so if today U.S. citizen and somebody, a permanent resident, walk in, then you either photocopy both of them or you don't photocopy either. But don't treat them differently, because like I said, it's just opening yourself up for potential litigation. You know, if somebody gets terminated, like I said, it's usually just either somebody doesn't get hired or somebody gets terminated. They're usually the ones that are going to call, you know, Department of Justice and say, hey, my former employer is discriminating against me, and because and then they'll come up with whatever the story is. Because of that, that's why I mentioned that and they fired me or whatever. You just don't want to open yourself up, I say. So, like I said, we don't, we try to, make sure you're just aware of that, you want to treat everybody equally.
Are we,
Sure.
what about the forms of ID that they give us? Where is the burden as far as whether some of it is real? Let's say it's not legitimate.
Right.
We don't know.
Right. Yeah, the burden of you is just solely on just completing the I-9 fully and maintaining it, and then having it ready to be produced if there is an audit. If the document on its face reasonably looks to be legitimate, that's all you're required to do.
We don't have to go through all this investigation to determine if it's real and everything.
No, if you choose to, and that's why I want to get to E-Verify a little later, but I want to let Abe talk a little bit about a compliance audit because he's one of our auditors. If you want that extra protection, which you're not required to under New York law, okay? It's a federal law, but for most places in the United States, it's voluntary. There's some states where the state government has required that employers in those states must run everybody through E-Verify. And E-Verify, I'll just, real quick, is like an internet-based system. It's when you do the I-9 form, if you choose to so use it, it's run by the government, it's free. It checks both Social Security and Department of Homeland Security's databases. It'll basically let you know if the documents are good. So you're not required to use it, but again, and it comes under the same anti-discrimination. If you start, let's say you decide you want to start using E-Verify, you start using it today, you use it for a year, you decide, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, for whatever reason. Again, you can stop using it, but you just have to document. Again, you just want to create an audit trail.
We're not obligated to.
You're not under New York. No, New York, it's still voluntary, and it'll probably be voluntary at some point in time. I wouldn't be shocked if the Congress says, hey, we were going to require it of all U.S. employees. But no, in New York, it's completely voluntary, unless you're a defense contractor.
What states is it not voluntary?
There's 19 states right now that have either required of all their employers or a lot of employers, but like I said, most of the Northeast does not require it. Usually, it's states along the southern border with Mexico, and there's more and more some of the states that are doing it now are either in the far west or in the south. So if you are, I don't have the full list in front of me right now.
What about like Florida?
Florida probably is a state that's requiring it, but I have to double check on that. Just because Florida seems like they have, and it may only be certain industries. I'd have to double check. I know like the first states that were doing it was like Arizona, and they were really big on doing it. Florida, I think does, but I'd have to double check. I don't have the whole full list in front of me. I just know that up here it's not required. New York, New Jersey, it's not required.
If we do use it, Did you say, should we post that we do use it?
That's-
Because I have a sign behind my desk that says I do use it.
Right, that is actually a requirement of E-Verify, that you post that, and it's actually for your benefit in a way, for a couple reasons also, because, one, what happens is, the biggest advantage of using E-Verify, besides that, knowing that yourself, that the person who has documents I just checked in there are legitimate, is that, people know who aren't legitimate and aren't authorized to work in the United States, they know what E-Verify is, okay? If they know that you are using it, most people are not going to come to you and apply for jobs from you, because they know it's wasting their time and your time, okay? So what happens is it just by posting that signage, I mean, you have to be using it to post it, but by having that signage up there, what happens is, like I said, you'll just see that very few people that you ever then run in E-Verify have any issues. It's something like, it's like 98 or 99% of the people that you run in E-Verify come back, everything's fine. That other 1% is usually people who have something that's just not matching right in the system, and it's something that I'll get into a little bit, but it explains that, they have a chance to then go down to either to Homeland Security or to Social Security to resolve whatever it is. It could be just a couple of numbers that are off on something, or like on their date of birth, or what, something popped it, but you'll get very few outright, no, this is, because again, the people that have counterfeit documentation know what E-Verify is. Is out there. I mean, and I said, it's a good system. It's been out there now, I think, again, probably around 2006 is when it came out as well. It's very easy to use, but I'll get into it a little bit. But, again, it's not required, but if you want that peace of mind that, hey, if I'm ever audited, I'm not going to find out, even if my I-9s are fine, which is one issue. The other issue is whether my workforce is authorized, and we would find out as part of the audit. You don't want to find out, that all of a sudden that, 5 guys that work for you aren't supposed to can't work here anymore, and now you're scrambling to replace them and whatever. So if you want to have that peace of mind that, hey, I know both my paperwork's authorized and legitimate, and then also my workforce is completely authorized. E-Verify is really good. I'll get into it a little bit later, but I kind of want to do compliance audit first, kind of just keep it like, because that's, again, a lot of times if we show up with a compliance audit, Abe's going to explain how that works, but basically that's when people realize, hey, I never heard these before, and next thing they're scrambling, like, where's my I-9s, or where's some of the other documentation that we need to do the audit. So I'll let you take, and I'll jump back in afterwards.
Hi, my name is Abe Peters. I'm one of the individuals tasked with conducting these inspections. And so, as Agent Scott mentioned earlier, our mission is to enforce compliance. We're not looking to put anybody out of business or to be punitive in any way. Our primary goal is to ensure that everybody is compliant with immigration laws when it comes to their hiring practices. So one of the things that we look for when it comes to the I-9 inspection is completeness of the forms itself. And so within all 3 sections, we're looking to have all the information that is required within that form to be there. And so when it comes to the hiring information, the date, the law states that employers are supposed to certify the documents within 3 business days. Okay, 3 business days from the hiring date. Now, depending on the auditor, I mean, we use our discretion on that. If it falls within 5 days, 7 days, or what have you, then we could be somewhat lenient. But if it's something egregious, like a month or 2 after the hiring date that the employer certified the documents, and that's something that may subject you guys to a violation. Something else, the attestation section within the form, where ask, what are you? Are you a citizen? Are you a legal permanent resident? Whatever it is, that individual, that employee, that potential employee must complete that section there. If it's not, then that, again, may lead to a violation. Now, these violations, they can be pretty hefty. And so we want to ensure that, again, all the information that is required is answered. The retention requirement as well, again, I just want to emphasize on that. It is 3 days from the hiring date or 1 year after termination. So if the person worked for you for 10 days, then you'll be required to retain the form for a year, right? But if the person, for 3 years rather, but if the person worked for you for 10 years, then it's just for a year, okay? So whichever is longer.
Say it again? Say it again.
So,
I missed that.
so it's either 3 days from the hiring date
Right.
or 1 year from the termination, or from the time that the individual leaves your
3 years
employment.
from the hiring or 1 year?
1 year
the-
from
Okay,
termination,
all right, I got
exactly.
it.
So whichever is longer.
3 years
Hold on to
from,
the document.
when
Yeah.
when you hire somebody, it's 3 years, you have to keep it for 3 years. But if they work for you for a really long time and you fire them, you only keep it 1 more year.
Right. Or they resign,
Yeah,
or they
anyway.
leave your place of employment.
Just keep
Year if they
everything.
leave, if they work
This
for
is,
you.
this is Congress. I mean, again, why they had to make it that way, I don't understand. There's a lot of things they do I don't understand. Okay, but yeah, if you hire somebody that you hire them today, they work for you for a week. Okay, and then you for whatever reason, yeah, they leave, you terminate them, whatever. You have to keep it from 3 years from that date of hire. So basically, you have to keep
3 years or 1 year?
3 in that case. Now they work for you for 10 years. Okay, and then they leave. Now you only have to keep it 1 more year because it's whichever's longer. So so 3 years from date of hire was 7 years ago, but they worked for you that whole time. So now I know it's convoluted. So at the very least, keep it for a year. But I
So they
mean,
work for a year and a half,
but
keep it
but
another year and a half.
but
So
like I
3
said,
years
it's
altogether.
if you have a lot of turnover and
3 years
especially short
altogether,
term, then yeah, you might want to stick with 3 years just to
Yeah.
so you don't.
Just
keep them.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why they just couldn't say 1 year from date. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But they came up with this rule and we're stuck with it. So yeah, I know.
How
It's,
does that work with rehires or people that come on HTV visas? If they've been with you for 15 years, but they leave you for 6 months and come back, if it's the same person, do you consider that solid, like they've been working for you for 15 years, or is
Well-
it every year you're?
Yeah, well, if it's just it depends. If they leave your employee completely, like you consider them terminated, then that comes back to the the question earlier about 3 years from the original hiring date. I would say you're probably gonna want to do a new I-9. If it's where you're just like, oh, you're taking a couple months leave of absence, but you're still considering them an employee. You might be able to say, well, okay, even though I didn't pay them for those couple months, they never left my employee. They just, so it's how you kind of define it. But I mean, if you want to be safe, I would say probably just, it's just always easier just to do another new I-9, especially also if the visa changed or whatever too. If that's why they left, like if they were like on that kind of visa. But
Do a new I-9, can you throw out the old I-9?
Yeah, that's what, if you're gonna complete a new I-9, then you wanna
yeah, go ahead.
keep the old I-9, just staple the old I-9 to the new I-9, just for,
it just
for
covers you. Like I said, our auditors aren't looking to jam you up, but if they just want to understand what you did. If they don't have no clue what you did, then that puts them in a spot. And then now they're trying to guess. Was there something, did you do? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, was there some bad intent or what? I mean, they're trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you just staple the old to the new, then in that case, they can just see and they can. And if they have a question, you can just explain to them, hey, this is what happened. But they'll see both, and it'll all match up, and everything's fine. Like I said, or we try not. They're not trying to punish people. But they just need to be able to understand themselves when they're reviewing it, because they'll come from the outside. They don't know how your business is being run. So we're trying to, it just gives them something to follow so they can kind of see that, hey, you did everything right and, there's nothing going on.
More
here.
documentation is better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The more
generally. Like I
you
said,
have,
it
the
just,
better it is for you.
it just
Absolutely.
makes it easier. If there's something confusing, it makes it easier for them to try
Yeah.
not to confuse it.
And during the course of the inspection, during the course of the audit, if we come across any individuals who have documentation that turns out to be invalid based on our information that we get from our resources, our databases, what we do is that we'll inform you through the course, verbally as well as through a course of a letter. We'll issue a letter, serve you guys a letter informing you of these individuals who we've found to be unauthorized to work within the United States. And so, in informing you of this, of our findings, now the burden is put on the employer to do the right thing and to be compliant within government laws and terminate these individuals, or at the very least to question them and ask them if they have any additional documentation, because it can be a situation where the individual, when they were hired, they did not have any legal documentation, but then through the course of time, through their employment, they were able to obtain that through a course of marriage or what have you, and they did not inform their employer, and so once you're informed of these individuals' statuses, it's the burden is upon the employers to become compliant, to get compliant with immigration requirements. I think that covers everything. But again, we're looking to enforce compliance, and throughout the course of the inspection itself, if we find any minor violations that isn't egregious. What we'll do is that we'll give you an opportunity to make those corrections within 10 business days. We'll send it out to you. You return it back with the corrections made, and then we'll proceed with the inspection and issue you guys a compliance notice indicating the end of the inspection itself. But again, that's what we do, and this is what we're here for. And if you have any questions, do you have any questions now? Or? Yes, yes, ma'am.
So if we have an audit or investigation,
Yeah.
and then you give us notice that, listen, you have a problem with these 3 guys, their paperwork's not legitimate, and you inform us, and then we're in a position where we need to no longer employ them, correct?
Correct.
Now, does that put the employee also in a position to be deported, or, you know?
They can be, it's just a question, at that point, I don't know if they will, it depends on if they have any other issues too, and then, again, with priorities right now, so they might wind up in that situation. But at the very least, that you as the employer, it's solely your job, and like I said, it's a 2-step process. First, they'll tell you, hey, we don't see, based on our record checks, that this person has legitimate documentation, and then they'll ask you, to talk to the employee, not to immediately just assume that that's final. And then if the employee, usually what happens is if an employee does not have legal documentation, at that point in time, they kind of, self-terminate usually, because they know, if they've been found out. But usually if the employee insists that they have status, that's when we will take a second look. Or they may have other documentation, or like Abe was saying, I've seen situations where, again, when you hire them, they were not authorized, but yeah, since then, and they might have been hired under a different name, totally, everything kind of, a bad identity. But now they've actually gotten, let's say, like he was saying, through marriage or whatever, they've actually been issued a green card, okay, and now they are legally allowed to work in the United States, a permanent resident. And they say, oh yeah, well here's my good identity, here's everything. Now that, for our purposes, if it turns out that is legitimate, we're okay with them staying on as an employee. But I get that question from employers, well, what, can I terminate? Yeah, and that's up to you. Like I said, if you feel like you've been, duped or misled all this time, and that's a business decision. That's not, us. We won't tell you that they have, if they now have status when we're doing the audit, then that's all we're concerned with, okay? But like I said, I've had situations where employers are like, well, what do I do? And it's like, well, that's your call. That's you have to make that internal decision.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's just that you see things on TV, on the news and stuff. ICE is coming in, and you see them dragging out a van load of people with handcuffs. That's the vision that I have. Usually,
and again, and it's usually ERO. It can be us if it's a part of a criminal investigation. If they did. Usually,
drugs, I understand that, but
yeah. No, usually what happens is, a lot of times, again, that's a lot of times it's enforcement rule operations, which is part of ICE, but it's a separate part, and they're usually looking for people that have already been adjudicated that have to leave the country. So let's say, they've gone to the immigration court, the immigration judge, they've had a case before the judge. They're given what it's called a final order, and say, hey, you need to leave, the country, either within 30 days or otherwise, report. And so what's happening with ERO, which has been in the news a lot, they'll go out and they'll look for that particular person, let's say, and then in the course of looking for him, if they encounter other people while they're, they go to his last known address and they knock on the door and, maybe he is there, maybe he's not there, but while they're there too, then somebody else is in that same location that turns out that they also have no authorization. Those are the people that are getting caught up with ERO, and that's what's been making the news a lot lately. That's generally not us. With us, like I said, we generally do criminal investigations, so if we had, word like that in a particular employer somewhere, let's say, is willingly going out to violate immigration laws. He's knowingly hiring people that aren't allowed to be in the United States, or there's been cases where they're actually having them smuggled into the United States. They're actually putting them up in housing, and these people are having to work off their housing costs and everything else, where the employer is totally violating every possible immigration law there is. Okay, there are cases like that. They're few and far between, but they exist. In that case, yes, when they come down and they go there to arrest, the employer or whoever in the company, whether it's the HR person, the owner, whoever, they may also at that point too, if they know, then also I'll see the 30 workers there are not legal, then there's a case, there could be would be us doing it, it would be a worksite case where they would be potentially arresting 30 people at a job site for being here illegally, but that's not what we're normally doing. Like I said, it's just It's usually ERO, and it's usually ERO, as I said, is looking for so-and-so, and if so-and-so, you know, this person happens, you know, a lot of times they usually try to arrest them at their residence. It's one, you know, sometimes they don't know where this person's living, but they find out where they're working. Those are the cases where you will see it at a job site. It's usually, most of the time, though, most of those arrests do take place at residences, or somewhere in the vicinity of the residence, because if they know where the person lives, then that's where they're generally going, because for a bunch of reasons, it's better to do it. You know, you know, even them, I think they try not to do it at a job site, unless they have no other choice, because they don't know where this guy lives, but they do know where he works. That's basically how that works. And if there's no other questions, I want to explain a little bit more about it. Yes?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Can someone work with a tourist passport from their country?
No, usually if they're here as a visitor, no, B2's, it's usually B2 status and they're not authorized to work here. If that's all they have, then yeah, they can't. They need something to show that they're actually, there's certain visas, again, with the H-1Bs and things like that, which give you employment rights. There's certain other things where certain types of students, like F1 students, normally an F1 in and of itself cannot work, but if they're given permission to work because they're doing an internship or something related to their major, then there's things like that where they have certain status. But there's a few visas allow you to work, but yeah, visitors is definitely not one of them.
Thank you.
Sure.
One more question.
Sure.
You know, again, watching on the news and stuff, I see, you know, a lot of discussion about that they look for people with criminal, they're looking for a person in particular.
Right.
And then the flip side of that is if they're in the country illegally, then that's a criminal, that itself, if just being here illegally, puts them in a criminal, you know.
It's
So
treated more as technically, yeah, I mean, it's treated as an administrative violation, but it can, but like I said, generally the priorities are, because again, there's only so many resources too, and you know, they're generally looking for people that have already been ordered removed, that have already had their day in court, which is where most of those cases start with, and then like I said, it's while they're looking for that person, that then they are encountering somebody else, but they're not, this other person is just, you know, they had no idea this other person was there. The other person wasn't a target, it just turns out, but then now that they're there, you know, they're in that situation, a lot of times they can't ignore the fact that they've now encountered somebody, because let's say it's the guy's brother or something, you know, whatever. You know, he's there at the house, they're not looking for the brother, it's just that, you know, the brother who's just illegal, but he was there while they're looking for the brother that has the final order of deportation. So, like I said, he's already had his due process, so that's what they're doing, that's how those cases usually start out. They're not randomly just going out to knock, you know, through a neighborhood, knocking on every door in the neighborhood. Yeah, there's a lot of legal reasons why they're not doing that, and there's also a lot of officer safety reasons why they don't just do that. They're usually, like I said, it's not us doing it, but it's a targeted thing. They're looking for a specific person. It's just like if you're looking for a fugitive from a criminal case, a U.S. citizen, you know, it's maybe wanted for kidnapping. Well, while you're there, you go with his last known address, and the guy opens the door. You know, it's not the guy you're looking for, but the other guy there has an open warrant for drug dealing. Well, the police aren't going to be like, oh, well, you know, you're not the guy we look for, so we're just going to leave you. They're going to take you then because you're still somebody that should be, you know. But like I said, they're not just randomly driving around neighborhoods. Yeah, just going, no, let's just, you know, let's just stop people on the street and grab them. That's not what they're doing.
So the stories from like last year at Saratoga about check cashing places and laundromats, which is where everybody would be, and then just kind of hauling off a whole crew of.
Yeah, again, I don't know anything about that, honestly. So I don't want to say I don't know anything. Actually, I have no idea what happened in Saratoga. But yeah. Oh, and about your other question about Florida. Florida, yes, it's a check for me. Only if you're a state contractor or subcontractor. So like basically, yeah, if you're working on a highway project or something, you'd have to use E-Verify. But if you're
well, if you're licensed through Florida, I mean.
Yeah, if you're just like a private business, no. It's Florida is always specifically to, like say, if you're a state contractor, like say if you're doing work for under a state bid, you know, you bid on a job.
Right.
So usually probably mostly be construction and things like that. But that's the only, so they're one of the 19, like I said. So some states require Arizona, I think, is everybody. Some states, it's only certain particular industries, like I said. It's usually, a lot of times it's state contractors because, again, you're working for the state, so it probably puts them in a bad spot if it turned out that, hey, you were the low bid, but now the reason you're the low bid is because, you know, your workforce is all, unauthorized, so they're.
Now, if you hire somebody just for the day, you know, I know you have the 3 days thing and everything like that, but they're just working for the day. If for us, like we're running a horse out of town or something, Do we have to get a whole I-9 and all that paperwork, and it's just
Technic-
a one-off kind of situation?
By law, yes. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
The question is, yeah, I mean, legally, yes, that's all I can say, is legally, you should, you know, what you do is,
If, bottom line, if they show up on the payroll,
right.
then chances are, yeah, you're gonna need to have a 99 form for that individual. So, we look to reconcile every individual's name on the payroll with an I-9 form. And so, if an I-9 form is missing, then it presents an issue. And so, we would like to have I-9 forms complete for every employee.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and just, yeah, true, again, back to Saratoga, again, the reason why I don't know about it, actually, because it's not part, our office, we handle 5 boroughs, Long Island, and the 7 closest counties. All the rest of that, the state is actually handled under Sac Buffalo and their offices. So it's just, I mean, it's not even like somebody in my office. I'm saying, like, it's not like,
Yeah, right.
I just honestly don't know. Like, I don't know. I just same way I wouldn't know what was going on in Iowa right now. It's, even though it's not that far away, it's not my office. So I don't want to, speculate on what they were doing up there, because I literally had, until you mentioned it, I didn't even know there was a thing. I may, you know, now you may be aware of it, I may want to figure out what was going on, but like I said, yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, while you're, I know how we do things down here, and, yeah, like I said, yeah, it's,
Would it not be operated under the same protocols though? I mean, you guys have the same boss, right? I mean,
well, same boss
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
yeah, but I'm trying to say, it's like you asking me, you know, I'm in the 110th precinct, what's going on? Yeah, I don't necessarily know what's going on in that precinct, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's different, you know, captains and so, you know, I don't know, so I'm saying, I don't want to just speculate what, I literally have no idea. I'm not saying it's,
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Jump in on this?
Sure.
Because I understand what they come, this is a group that operates in a variety of states.
understood.
So every field office around the country sets its own priorities against an overarching national strategy. So that's one of the reasons why it's not that they're not going to have the visibility in, and the agent in charge of the Buffalo office will set his own agenda. Okay, and that's our challenge.
are we gonna have a similar thing like this in Saratoga with that guy?
We'll try. We'll try.
Wow, that guy's in trouble.
We are.
So, yeah, what are the other?
Saratoga's like a SWAT team comes in.
Man, really?
But that's-
Is anybody else, I know the one gentleman said he's already using E-Verify, is anybody else use E-Verify, or just curious, or know what E-Verify is, or, all
We'll know
right.
what it is.
Okay, all right, so yeah, just that's just part of my job, just make sure you're aware of what it is. Like I said, it's okay, like I said, it's a pretty easy to use system, and that kind of like I said, it gives you some peace of mind. The only thing with E-Verify is, again, too, is if you start using it, you can only run your new hires from that date forward in E-Verify. You can't go back and run your existing workforce. And again, that's another Congress law. Yeah.
Wow.
And that's, again, another, why, again, I don't know why,
Yeah,
that's just the rule, which brings me to kind of image, which is kind of also my main thing, what I do, and why image came about. Image is, incorporates E-Verify as one of the things in there, but basically, image was a way, like I was saying from the beginning, kind of to be proactive and go out to employers and say, hey, we understand that the overwhelming numbers of employers are not intentionally violating the law. It's just whether or not they are accidentally violating it just because they just don't know what the law is. So they're like, let's create a program where, again, which is the role I fill, to go out and bring companies, you talk to companies first of all, at the very least make them aware of these different things. But for a company that may be interested in it, to say, hey, if you want to, it's a partnership basically with the image program is to say, we'll come out and if you, again, it's voluntary, it's free, but you have to, there's an application you have to fill out and things like that. But if you go through the process, what we will do is we will actually vet your entire workforce, because again, even if, whether you're using Verify or not, like I said, there's that gap where there's people that, even if a company already is, there's maybe long-term employees who were hired pre-E-Verify. So we will run everybody the same, we'll basically do a compliance audit, but without the intent or the risk of fine, because we're doing it, again, to either let you know you are in compliance, or if you're not, to tell you what you need to do to become compliant.
Right.
Okay, so if we find things that, again, if it was a regular involuntary compliance audit, we may find things that are wrong with your I-9s where you would be potentially looking at a fine. We'll say, no, this is what you're doing wrong. We'll highlight them, we'll say, this is what you need to fix on your I-9s. And the individual ones too, like I'm saying, like this, for this person, the date of birth's missing. For this person, they didn't check off one of the boxes. For this person, you know, on section 2, that they put New York driver's license but no number. And it's not one of those cases where, again, there's a photocopy attached to the document, so the auditor can't tell what number was given to you, so we don't know if it was a legitimate or illegitimate driver's license. So as part of that image program, yeah, you agree to let us do that and come in and sit down with you and go through your stuff and tell you if it's good or not, but we also will vet the workforce. So we will run everybody in our systems and let you know if anybody got on board that doesn't have legitimate documentation, kind of like what Abe said. But again, for that purpose, that's identical, but we would still give you the same notices saying, hey, this person, you know, identity documentation doesn't seem to be legitimate. Talk to them, let us know what they say. But it's a way to try to help employers. Like I said, if they want that help, it's voluntary. But to say, hey, come on in, let's go through everything. So by the time we finish the process, you know and we know that you're 100% in compliance. And as part of that too, like I said, there's actually there's an application. If you get approved to join the program, there's actually they do a signing ceremony. You come down and you meet our bosses here in Manhattan, in the New York office here. If it's assuming you're headquartered here. If you're headquartered somewhere else, like, but you work here, then it's wherever you're headquartered. So if you're headquartered, in Kentucky, then I mean, I could put you in touch with whoever, but you have my contact info, but you would do that down there, just because we usually go to the headquarters, so that's where the I-9s usually are physically stored, and that's usually whoever the person is that's dealing with the I-9s is usually at the headquarters as well, you know, and, you know, even if you're, you know, 20, I don't know how many, I don't know what sizes, you know, even if you're, you know, 15, 20 employees, but you're covering different parts of the year, your different tracks, whatever. It's wherever you're actually based out of. Just because, like I said, it just makes sense to do it that way. And then at the end, you get a certificate, and it says that you're now a member of the image program. But the biggest thing for image is that, again, we review your stuff, that you start using E-Verify if you're not already doing so, and that you basically agree to review your I-9s internally once a year, just so that you kind of make sure that you stay in compliance. Because again, sometimes it's not willful, but again, just in the rush of everything else and all the other paperwork you're dealing with, somebody's I-9, you realize, hey, wait a second, you know, the employee never signed it. Okay, well, that's how you catch that then. So our goal is to get you in compliance if you're not already there, and then once you're there, to make sure that you stay there basically forever. Because again, our goal is solely you know, getting people to do this right. Because again, it's been over 30 years now, and like I said, we still, when we go out and do compliance audits, especially smaller mom and pops or businesses where they're bigger. I've seen businesses where they've had over 50, 60 employees, but you know, when they started out in the 1930s and it was two generations removed, you know, there were no I-9s back then, and you know, because the company started in the 1930s. It's now 86 I-9. Somehow they missed that. Now we are 32 years later. Walk in the door, it's now the grandson or the granddaughter, and they're like, "What's an I-9?" And you're like, "But you have, you know, you would think they're sizable enough that they should know about it." But like I said, so we see that. So our goal is still to try to get out there, go to chambers of commerce, go to different associations. Again, like today, which again I appreciate it, to try to just get the word out there, because if we ever got to the point where we got really close, if not, I'm assuming we'll never get to 100% compliance, but we really want to get it up there. I mean, like I said, it's our goal. You know, we have no incentive to fine companies. The only reason we fine essentially is because if there was never any risk of fine, then you know, why would you'd be like, I don't need to do, well, who cares? So it's not we want to do it, but if it's to the point where it's almost we're forced to do it sometimes, because we get to, again, if you get to a company with 50 employees and I mean, it's just, you know, at some point it's like, well, you get, you know, there's got to be some kind of punishment or penalty just because, but our goal is we'd rather get everybody in compliance, and every audit basically be everything's good and here's a compliance letter and, you know, have a nice day and that's it. You know, that's really our goal. There's no, finding is really a last resort, but like I said, sometimes it's just, we have no choice. It's just so bad, the paperwork and stuff like that. Any other questions? Okay, so again, if you have my contact info, if you think of it after today, or you just didn't want to talk in front of people, you want to run something by me, feel free. I'm not, again, it's outreach education. The goal is not to, I'm not going to then turn around and go, oh my God, like whatever. But if you if you don't have I-9s yet, and if there's anybody out there, start doing them today. Don't backdate them. Do them with today's date on it, but do it as soon as possible. And I said, or do its internal self-audit, even if you think you have I-9s. Take a quick look at them, make sure that they're done right. Because like I said, if you catch it now, and then hopefully you're never audited. But if you are audited 7 years from now and you catch it today and you fix it, then by the time you're audited, everything was, you know, and it's do a note too, to the, sorry, like a little memo, you know, on this date, so the auditor knows, again, that's the whole purpose. On this date, you know, I went to this thing, or I did an internal self-audit, I found out, hey, you know, I have 10 employees, I only found 8 I-9s, so for the 2 guys I couldn't find I-9s for, on this date I created new I-9s for them, you know, and put a memo on this, you know, I did on this date, couldn't find it, and that's it. So if you ever audited, the auditor will have that, attach it to the I-9. He'll see why this, you know, even though the guy was hired in, you know, in 2007, you just did an I-9 for him in 2018. You know, we're trying to just, we're people, you know, we're not trying to go out and this gossip thing, but just try and stay on top of it, because like I said, the I-9 audits have been going on for 30 years, they're gonna probably go on for as long as there's an I-9. And you just don't want to be that person that, that's unlucky enough to get an audit and not have everything done right, and then get jammed up for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.